Hi, I'm Jordan, and welcome back to the Fourfold Path. We just finished up the first arc in its totality, the discussion of process, the playing of the actual game, and the post actions of editing it up into a radio drama. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what worked, what didn't, and where we might go going forward. So just from 10,000 feet, there were some things that didn't work as well as I might have wanted them to at a meta level. So first and foremost, I committed to running a full arc before I made any serious changes. And I intentionally did things in a structure that gave me more reps at each thing back to back to back to back. In order to, the goal there was to give myself enough experience to really get into the flow of that particular action. I was hopeful that being in that flow would give me a better basis for evaluation. So I did 4 play episodes back to back to back to back in recording, and then I did the radio edits of each back to back to back to back. I think going forward, that's not how we're going to do things. We'll be layering things in so that they're fresher when I work on them, but that was a decision I made and one that I'm going to change going forward. The other thing is that I found that the radio drama stuff didn't work for me. There are a lot of series that do that and do that extremely well that I respect a lot. It's a lot of what got me started down this path, but to be honest with you, I am interested in writing and writing fiction, and I am not as interested in voice acting. So I'm going to change the target of that going forward as well. I'm thinking about doing it as a serial, so short fiction pieces representing each play session, and then to keep it in a format that is easier to consume and podcast and YouTube friendly, dramatic readings of those. So there's still some voice work involved, but it's not the same amount of, there's not the expectation of Foley, and it's not about pace and dialogue and all that stuff. I can just read the words on the page, which are the things that I'm most interested in. And I'm hopeful that that pivot is going to keep things fresh and keep me engaged. So with that said, let's go back to the retrospective on what worked and what didn't. First of all, I'm going to follow a start, stop, and continue style of retro and go through the things that I feel like I need to start doing going forward. The first is I'm using ChatGPT and OpenAI on the back end, the productized version, not an API gateway, to do some of the LLM lifting that I expect in the tools I'd like to build up front. So these are things like taking my whisper transcripts and summarizing show notes. And also things like taking a description of a scene just from the text and producing an element that's suitable for inclusion in my gameplay notes inside of Obsidian. Even things like, hey, here are my list of threads and here's the scene. Which threads do you think got touched on meaningfully? So I have an idea too, but having it second checked has been having the system check it for me or second guess me, which is how I got to that weird linguistic kerfuffle, has been interesting. So I need to build some lightweight tooling to support that. There's an interface that's a limitation in ChatGPT. Online, you can have 20 documents in a project. Well, I've got my documents sliced relatively thin, and there are getting towards or more than 20 of them. And so I need to do things like concatenate character files together and hand a character omnibus across. Same with things like threads and locations. I think that will make that lift easier. We already talked about the scene by scene play through process cadence work that I'd like to do. Rather than batching everything up and doing it in segments, I want to do one element from start to finish at a time. That may reduce the frequency between play sessions, and that might reduce the freshness of the game in my mind, but the hope and notionally the idea is that all of the note taking is supposed to prevent that from being a problem. So we're going to lean into it. We mentioned the radio drama with serialized fiction. The radio drama just isn't my thing. So I'm going to try it a different way and see if that lands for me. And while I've been paying attention to where I'm experiencing friction in play so far, I haven't been recording what my workflow is explicitly, and I'm going to capture that. because when I get to automation, the thing I'm going to be doing is automating my workflows. Let's look at the things I'm going to stop. So I haven't really been doing manual faction tracking. I'm going to stop beating myself up over that. It's just too heavy for what's going on right now. There aren't really factions in the fiction yet. It's unclear if the burglar is an individual actor or part of a larger group. And the second world that I intend to encounter later on just doesn't exist in the fiction yet. So there's not a lot to track, and a lot of that would be doing a lot of motion that we may not encounter or never encounter, because the story around the university is pretty interesting so far. I had been double rendering my videos, once without background music and once with background music. I'd been doing that to support Whisper. So the idea, or my belief was that without background music in place, Whisper would do a better job of transcriptioning. Because the music I'm using has no lyrics, it actually hasn't affected anything in a way that I've been able to tell. So I'm effectively doing sort of rendering busy work that's compute heavy, and I'm going to cut it out. I spent a considerable amount of time, frankly, working on 3D printed fobs for the battle mats. And two things I've noticed. We had one very action-heavy sequence, and we did the entirety of that sequence with clocks rather than battle maps. So it was a chase scene, and in many chase scenes you'd want positioning in hallways and whatnot. That was going to be too heavy of a lift. It didn't make sense for the way that I'm playing the game or the stories that I'm trying to build. So as neat as the 3D printed fobs might be, they're an eventually thing if we get to it, right? If suddenly tactical combat becomes a larger portion of the game, I'll be more interested in it. It'll make more sense to make those. But we'll cross that Rubicon when we come to it. In terms of the things I'd like to continue, I think Cypher and Mythic are doing a yeoman's work for me. I really like the interplay between the character arcs in Cypher and the threadless in Mythic. I like how easy it is to set up a new NPC for combat, or for contests rather, and I like how easy it is to... It's not easy. The roles are simple, but it turns out that picking the difficulty of a task is still kind of challenging. I'm feeling that out. But I think Cypher is still a good system for us to use, especially because it's... I don't know what game system I would go pick up for social combat in an academic setting. Like, that's not just at the tip of my tongue, you know? So I'm going to continue to run Cypher for that. I'm going to continue to intermix process and tooling episodes with the play, where when I run into friction, I'm like, oh, here's a thing I need to do. And talk about what it is I did. In fact, one of those is coming up in the near future. I'm going to talk about the system prompts that I've been tooling around on to make the LLM portion of the work easier so that the output's closer to what I want. So look forward to that. I'm going to continue to do the overhead filming. Like, even though I'm not doing anything interesting with the battle mat, even though there's not going to be tactical combat and whatnot, and most of what you're seeing is me writing on note cards and me flipping through books, I think there's something to that. The purpose of the play episodes is to show on some level that it's messy, that it's time consuming, and that no one instantly knows exactly what they're going to do, save that they've been doing improv professionally for their whole career. So like, most of us aren't actors or comedians, and so we're going to be thinking a little bit harder when we're encountering a novel situation and trying to figure out what to do in the fiction. I think showing that's useful. Similarly, I think showing the note cards and what I think of as the scene touch points is informative. And if I'm wrong about that, feel free to tell me. Man, like, really on point right there. So I'm still getting over the cold, and it's very annoying. But I'm going to continue to use claps as an edit marker. I've found a relatively low weight way for me to identify places where I want to draw my attention in the audio stream via literally clapping my hands. And that's been making the edit process go faster. I might also introduce a piece of colored paper that I just, lay out here over the mat to be like, okay, when I'm visually scanning, I can see that element in the keyframes. But it would just be another way of me identifying segments where I need to go back and elide them because my throat was clogged, or I had to clear it, or my kid ran in and needed something, or my cat started yowling at the door. All in all, I'm relatively happy with how the first arc went. Narratively, I really like it. So I'm happy with Tabitha as a character. I'm glad that Jennifer got pulled in to the defense of Janus thread. And even though I was relatively frustrated throughout, I never got to a single scene I had planned. Every time it was an interrupt scene. But the seed of every interrupt scene pulled into the threads that I already had in a way that I found very fulfilling. So the story was still going in a general direction that I thought was interesting, but it wasn't getting there in the way that I had anticipated. When I started off, I was like, oh, there's going to be a museum scene, and there's going to be some shadowy cabal or some professor associated with the visiting relics, and that's going to be our goad into the world of secret magical mathematics. And instead, it was it was a very mundane college story about a grad student who was well-meaning but stepped outside of the honor code, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that quickly escalated to, yes, and someone is interested in the research that they're doing on the side and breaking into their place and stealing it. So there are interesting questions about who could have possibly known about this stuff and been able to track them down, and. Those are all story beats that I'm interested in pursuing. And they wouldn't be there except that I let the tools take more control of the narrative and decided to follow it. So that's been fun. I believe that's all I have to say for the scope of the retro. So next time's likely to be a process episode, frankly, about the prompt engineering and the specifically the persona prompts and the output directions that I gave the LLM in order to get the file output to be something that's more easily ingested in Obsidian for myself, since that's the biggest part of my workflow. This episode is also going to air alongside the radio dramas. I decided to include those as sort of a let's do the work in the open kind of a belief. I'm not happy with the way the radio dramas came out, but I am happy that doing them revealed to me that isn't how I want, that isn't the creative output that I want from this particular set of play. It's not the artifact I want to leave behind. I want to do more writing because that's what I like to do. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.